Hey, what's up? You're up there. I'm Dan Fredenberg, and this is an interview for FIGGERRIDOUT.com with Jeff Holst, who's a buddy of mine. And the problem is that the audio really sucks. I just wanted to take a second and apologize for that. But this interview is really, really awesome, and it's one of those ones where I was thinking about re-recording my questions because there was a little bit too much umming and awing and all that sort of stuff as well. But Jeff is just such a smart guy, and it was such a cool conversation. One of the biggest ones for me is if somebody decided that they wanted to try to pass the bar exam without going to law school, what would that look like? Is it actually possible? Is it common? And turns out it's illegal. Anyway, enjoy this episode. Catch it. What's up? I'm Dan Fredenberg, and this is Figure It Out, another dream job interview. I'm with Jeffrey Holst, and one of the things that stood out for me is that you're the only licensed attorney I've met that hasn't had a bad day in over 10 years. So thanks for being here, Jeff. And so you're a leukemia survivor as well?
Yes.
There you go. Good stuff. And so you also know that we're all living on borrowed time, so to speak, right? Is that why you say that you haven't had a bad day in 10 years?
That's not actually why I say that. I actually gave up bad days about 13 years before I got diagnosed with leukemia. And I mean, that day was a tricky day. Like, some days are better than others. And that one was a challenging one. But I really believe that, your perspective matters, and good and bad stuff happens to everyone every day. So I focused on the positive even that day and made it through there. And once you make it through that day, the rest of them are actually kind of easy. So.
Yeah. I put that with the what do you want to call it? The source that question came from is just because I had a collapsed lung. I had an injury this year, and that I was unvaccinated when it happened. So I figured that that was a pretty bad combination. And
it sounds like it. I'm glad you made it through that, because that sounds dangerous.
Yeah. And it's a good thing that I had lemonade just before this interview, so I got all choked up sounding. That wasn't even what it was. But moving along, so a little bit more about me. I was a guitar teacher at the local music store when I was 16, and that made me aware of part of my personality that I think you have as well, which is delight in questioning authority. I may be wrong. I like to do whatever. Just basically, you shouldn't actually be able to do this, but in this extremely specific situation, you absolutely can. But one thing that does differentiate the two of us is I've got software licenses, I've got a driver's license. But you got quite the collection of certificates and degrees and things that you don't really offer as services. And those of you in the in the audience who know Jeff but don't know me, this interview has the recurring topic of how do you succeed in your field if you have no cash, friends, or family. And one of the biggest walls to success, in my opinion, is not being able to introduce yourself well. So how about you do that before we talk about your paper? Can you introduce yourself for a sec?
Sure. So I'm Jeff Holst, and I don't like to define myself as any specific thing. So people are like, oh, I'm a lawyer, I'm a real estate investor, or whatever. Those are true statements. If I am forced to introduce myself, I say I'm a recovering lawyer, which might be why I don't have bad days, because I don't practice law and I don't want to practice law. I really just try to live the best version of my life that I possibly can. And for me, that's just about trying to do interesting things and provide value to the world.
Yeah. I think that's why we hit it off fast as well. Me, I ended up picking up a bunch of different skills here and there, and they were all out of necessity. And I've been a complete gig economy sort of person, but one of the first things that really jumped out at me in our conversation was something that I'm now finally comfortable enough to admit online. I was talking about whether deliberately going to the cheapest accredited law school makes sense for someone whose wealth plan is like yours, specifically like real estate related. So like, first of all, let's talk about that. Like, does it make sense if you want to do real estate? Like, does it make any sense to get a law degree, or like, is
Well,
there?
yeah, so there are advantages, right? I mean, there's some of the training that you get in going to law school that's very, very useful. Things like, understanding how mortgages actually work rather than just like the finance side. I actually think that a finance degree makes a lot more sense. But but if you wanted to study law, there are some common law elements that date back, like how estates are created. Like you have fee simple estate, which is the basic way that people hold ownership in the entire English Commonwealth. So Canada, the US, England, in any of the English Commonwealth, that's the fee simple ownership of land. But there's all these different forms of real estate ownership, like a leasehold interest. Technically, that is a ownership it's a leasehold ownership, so it terminates naturally at some period, and that's what a lease is. You go lease an apartment, technically you own that apartment, or at least a piece of the rights to that apartment, right? Like the landlord has to protect your rights. They don't have a choice. They can't just kick you out for no reason. If you violate the lease, then you may have terminated your own interest in the real estate. But until that happens, then you have this ownership interest. And some of those nuances, they're really good at teaching you in law school. But in reality, none of that's really relevant, other than like sort of on a maybe an interest level. You can learn that stuff by watching a YouTube video or like just talking to me. So like there's not that much to learn.
Right.
So I don't know that I would say people need to go to law school if they want to be a real estate investor. In fact, I would say absolutely not. Now, on the other hand, if you want to go to law school and you just want to learn this stuff, there's something wrong with that. I went to law school. I don't regret going to law school. I regret practicing law sometimes, but I never regretted going to law school.
That's funny, especially as a programmer, which, it's like, I keep on telling people there are two types of programmers. I rip it off from Louis C.K., right? They're the ones that'll tell you they do it only for the money, and fucking liars. That's the other kind.
Yeah. Well, that's why I went to law school. I did it for the money. I mean, I'll be honest. Like I thought, hey, I want to travel, and like the only thing I knew was my dad was a lawyer and he made a lot of money. So I went, that seems like a good strategy. I'll be able to travel more if I have more money. And it worked okay until I got leukemia and decided I didn't want to practice law anymore. But, other than that, it worked pretty well.
Right. Well, I guess that's part of what lawyers do in contracts is they always make sure that there's an exit plan that makes sense. And there's not a whole lot of room for exit plans in degrees, really, No,
it's a very expensive hobby. If you just go to it's the education. It's $100,000 or something to learn a few things. Like, that's not the right strategy. There are better ways to learn that.
Right. So I mentioned that it was a little bit embarrassing earlier, and now I'm to the point where I can talk about it, which is the movie. Do you remember the movie with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, Good Will Hunting?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a part where he defends himself in court, even though he's never attended college. I also know that the guy Frank Abagnale, the
Catch Me If You Can guy. Yeah, and I love that where he takes the bar exam, and that actually happened, right? He studied and took the bar exam and passed it without ever having gone to law school, like 19 years old or something like that.
Yeah, right. But so like, is that something that like all attorneys hear of? Is is that like common at all? Like, how often does that happen where somebody comes out of the blue and like they passed, and even though they didn't go to law school?
So in most jurisdictions, at least in the United States, you can't take the bar exam if you haven't gone to an accredited law school. So it's not really an option. Mm-hmm. But there are exceptions. For example, at least when I was looking into this, Wisconsin had a thing that was called reading for the law. And if you did like a 3 or 4 year internship with a law firm and then passed the bar exam, you could get licensed, but that license was only valid in Wisconsin. So unless you wanted to live in Wisconsin, it wasn't really useful for you. But no, I've never heard of anyone passing the bar exam without going to law school. But again, I don't think very many people take the bar exam without going to law school. So
Right, right. Yeah, that's just interesting, especially because the first law schools were just pubs in the late 1800s, right?
yeah.
Like nearby the courts. So and then here we are. Not only do you have to have the license, you also have to have the degree. So no amount of YouTubing is going to
Yeah.
get you.
Well, and they make it illegal, right? Like, I don't know, it is everywhere, but like in the US, it's actually literally illegal to practice law without a license. So if you try to act as an attorney, you go to jail
Right.
or get fined or something, right? Like it's literally a crime. It's not even like, civil, like against the rules civilly. It's like actually a crime, and people do go to jail for this. Generally, when people go to jail, it's usually like ex-lawyers that have been told they're not allowed to practice anymore because they violated the rules, and then they keep practicing anyway. Like they hold themselves out as a lawyer even though they're technically not. But even even just like doing what Frank Abagnale did, like that actually is a crime. Like because he was, even though he passed the bar,
he forged the documents, right?
Yeah, he wasn't.
I forgot about that part. Yeah.
So he faked his degrees and stuff like that. Fascinating book, actually. The movie's really cool, but the book is really interesting. He's a fascinating guy. So
yeah, definitely. And just so I'm giving a vector as well. Like I know that like self-representation is super stupid. But like more what I'm thinking is like I'm interested in knowing what lawyers know so that they can kind of size up other lawyers. Like I imagine that knowledge of civil procedure, that always comes in handy.
Super handy, yeah. So like knowledge of civil procedure, knowledge of the rules of evidence, that's actually really important too, which is another form of civil procedure, right? Like what's admissible and what's not. Because just being able to prove something it's severely limited if you can't get the evidence in, right? I actually was just on jury duty last week, and there was a whole bunch of stuff I would have liked to have known in deciding this case, but we weren't told it. And people were like, why didn't they tell us this? Why didn't they tell us that? And I was like, I probably wasn't admissible. Like I knew what the reason was, but I decided not to share that with my fellow jurors because I didn't really want them to be like, oh, let's just do whatever that lawyer says.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the knowledge would definitely be useful, and that's why I don't regret going to law school. I mean, and not just in real estate, like contract law, understanding what forms an enforceable contract, understanding what the possible penalties are, understanding what stuff's going to get thrown out, understanding, the tricks of the trade can really matter. Things like how do you properly secure an interest in something that's not real estate? Like everyone knows that you file a mortgage on real estate, but what about like if you're a mechanic and you fix somebody's car? Like how does a mechanic lien work, right? Or what if you install something in someone's house? Like how does that, how do you protect yourself? Or let's say I want to loan Dan $500 and he says, I'll give you my pocket watch, right? And like when you give it back, I'll give you the $500 back and then you can give me my watch back. Well, how do I do that legally? Right? Like what is that transaction? How should it be structured? That kind of stuff is called security interest. And a mortgage is just one of those. And that's a fascinating topic. And when I was doing bankruptcy law, there were attorneys that didn't understand that very well. And there's consequences to that. If you don't properly protect the security interest, your debt becomes unsecured, and unsecured debt goes away in bankruptcy where secured debt does not. So there's a lot of different ways that you do this, and the different types in the US, at least there's this thing called the Uniform Commercial Code that determines how different types of assets are secured. And if you don't do them right, like there are, like I said, severe consequences. And I see it wrong a lot. Especially in transactions between, family members or friends, where they just go, oh, like we'll just sign this piece of paper and that'll solve everything. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you have to file with a county or a city. Sometimes you have to put a notation on a title if there's a titled asset. It just depends on the jurisdiction and and what the asset type is.
Right. So I guess where I'm going is I'm really looking for the parts where intuition won't steer you in the right direction. And I can think of one example that I learned from an online course on law, which was with contract law. Basically, everything is non-binding unless there's been consideration.
Mm.
And as a matter of, so in other words, like a contract, you can have it whatever, but like if you want it to be binding, you should write in. It's like, and I'm going to give you like $1 or $5 or something.
Yeah, and actually, consideration is one of the most misunderstood concepts because, first of all, it's not intuitive, like you said, right? Consideration really means that there has to be an exchange of value on both sides for a contract to be valid. I can promise you something all I want, which is really what a contract is. It's just a formalized promise. But if you don't promise me something back, then that's not a contract. The contract requires both sides to make mutual promises. And it can be something like you said, $1, like you'll give me $1 if I give you my cell phone. Be it unequitable, sure, but it's still a contract, right? Like my cell phone's probably worth more than $1. But but if it's not, if there's no consideration, like I promise to do something, like, and you don't have to do anything in exchange for it, then there doesn't actually have to be money exchanged, right? Your promise can be like, I could say, hey, if you come over to my house and mow my lawn, I'll give you my cell phone. No money exchanged, right? But like, it's still a deal. Like we made a contract, and that's an oral contract, and that can be enforceable. But there are even rules on that, like the statute of frauds. It says certain types of contract have to be in writing, and some don't. But like if it's over $500, for example, in most jurisdictions in the U.S., like it has to be in writing. If it's about real estate, it has to be in writing. I can't contract with you over a handshake to sell you my house. Right? It's not binding. It's specifically excluded from that. And so that kind of stuff, you don't know what you don't know. So you kind of do the formal education of law school can be very useful for that.
Right. Yeah, it just hits me that's an insider sort of thing, because the case that I saw, they were talking about making an option. So it was more of a situation like, I want the ability to buy here's a contract to buy your phone for $40, and for that right, I'm going to give you $1 of consideration. And apparently, like this prop was saying that you don't actually even have to pay the dollar, but that part has to be in the contract in order for it to be enforceable.
Yeah, and actually, technically speaking, if you put it in the contract with the intent of never paying it, then that would be a breach, and it wouldn't be enforceable. So people use that like fake consideration all the time to make it like on the surface enforceable, but you're really actually much better off to actually pay the dollar. Like if you're gonna do it, pay the dollar, and you know what? Write a check to pay the dollar. So there's proof that you
in the mail.
There's the mailbox rule actually for this stuff too. By the way, for formation of contracts, actually we could get really geeky on contracts, but the mailbox rule says that like, because the other critical elements of contracts are offer and acceptance. So like I can offer you my cell phone in exchange for mowing my lawn, and you could say no. We don't have a contract until you say yes, right? So that's the acceptance part. Like I make an offer and you accept it. Likewise, you can't accept something I don't offer. You can't be like, hey, I'll mow your lawn for your cell phone. I agree, right? Like if I didn't offer it to you, and you can't agree to it, right? And that's intuitive in a contract like that. But in more complicated business settings, sometimes offer and acceptance isn't intuitive. And so the mailbox rule says, like if I make an offer to you, like if I mail you a written agreement that says, hey, if you mow my lawn, I'll give you my cell phone. And then like a couple of days later, my neighbor comes over and goes, hey, I'll mow your lawn, for free because I'm just a nice guy. I might no longer want to sell you my cell phone for mowing my lawn, right? And and you can accept it even if I don't want it anymore, unless I revoke it. And because I mailed it to you, you have the right to mail your response back to me. So once you drop your response in the mailbox, it becomes a binding contract, even though I haven't received it yet. But up until the point you drop it in the mailbox, I can revoke the offer. I could call you up and be like, hey, I changed my mind. And if you haven't mailed it yet, then you're out of luck. But if you've already mailed it, you can be like, hey, I mailed it yesterday. Sorry.
Yeah.
And that's the mailbox.
Should you have like a video at the post office? You know, here it is. Like,
well, it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt,
Yeah.
because sometimes proving this stuff is really difficult, right? Like we have postmarks, right? So it says what day it was mailed. But what if I tell you at noon I don't want you to mail it, and you mailed it at 10 in the morning, right? Like this stuff is really complicated. Actually, it's much easier in the modern world, because who mails out contracts? Now we email this stuff, and it's time stamped to the second, right?
Right.
So it's really easy to know if the contract was signed or whatever. Electronic signatures actually are very useful for that. But yeah, I mean, delivery has to be consistent with the offer. So if I email you it, you can't then mail me a response back in like the snail mail and expect me to be bound by it. No, it does become binding when I receive it, right? Like if I email you a contract, you sign it, print it out, sign it, and mail it back to me. When I receive it, it becomes binding. But because it's not sent in the same format, you don't get the benefit of that mailbox rule. So that kind of stuff, like that's the kind of stuff you learn in law school, right?
Yeah.
You just can't learn unless you're talking about it like this. You're not gonna. The problem with it is, if you Google mailbox rule, you're going to find like a YouTube video on it, right? For sure you will, but you're not even going to know to look for it. And so that's where law school can be good. But I actually think I might be able to teach you a secret workaround. You want to hear that?
Sure.
Okay, so there's this thing called Law in a Flash. They're produced by Aspen Publishers, the biggest like law textbook manufacturer out there. They make these flashcards for every topic in law school. You get evidence, civil procedure, contracts, criminal law. You don't necessarily need to do all of them. They're not cheap. They're like maybe $100, right, for one set of flashcards. But if you do these flashcards, you can pass the bar exam. I'm convinced of it. Like, you don't have to go to law school. Just do the flashcards like 2-3 times through. When you don't get an answer right, set it aside and redo that one. When you get an answer right, set it aside, but put a little mark on it. And like, I got it right once. And once you get the same card right a couple of times in a row, you're good. You got the concept. It teaches you issue spotting. And my first year of law school, I didn't do very well. My second year of law school, I knew about these cards. I did the cards before I took the class, got all A's for the rest of this time I was in law school. Like doing the cards ahead of time taught me the concepts better than being in law school.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I really believe you could just do the cards and take the bar exam and pass, but you wouldn't even need to. Just do the cards, and then you'd know about the mailbox rule, and it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Because me personally, I'd have no intention of actually practicing. It's just a matter of like, if I'd had a streamlined way of knowing that, like even if the other person's an attorney, I'm pretty good shape.
You could know more. Like honestly, like you could know more than most attorneys, because like the one thing about law school is most people just cram all this information in their head and then forget about it right afterwards. The real advantage of going to law school is learning to spot issues, because that's the thing. Like you can go research the law if you know the issue exists. If you know there's a question of consideration, you can go study what consideration is. But if you don't know that consideration exists, you're not going to go look for it. And so that's where the flashcards, and they have there's other supplements like casebook supplements that give you like summaries of cases and stuff. You can read those. And then there's universal commercial code in a nutshell type books that are like summaries of the whole topic. Very exciting stuff. That actually was a pretty good book. It's by a guy named Brad Stone, who was a professor of mine. And I love that book, but I think I'm a weirdo. Most people thought it was terrible, but I'll tell you, it served me really well as a bankruptcy attorney, because I was able to win things for my clients that people were like, how do you know this stuff? And it's like, well, I read the Universal Commercial Code in a nutshell. That's how I know it.
Right. That's so funny. Yeah. So the part of the reason I was asking is because I have the IT background, I have the digital security background, so I know about the transfer of information and the logging and all that kind of stuff, and the things that people do to spoof different things. And so that makes me a very skeptical person right from the beginning. But the other thing that makes it even a bigger one is my history in education. So what I think you just described is actually an inadequacy of the testing process. There's basically, I think the what was that entrance exam kerfuffle. Yeah, I think that was a great example, right? Which is that if where there's a will, there's a way. If there's a test, then for enough money, somebody will slip you the answers.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, for sure that's the case, right? I mean, we saw that in the entrance exam scandal, like you said, but you see that in all college entrance exams, and really in any kind of standardized exam, there's always a way to study for the test, even if you're not cheating. Studying for a test is not the same as learning, right? Like I can memorize a bunch of facts and take a test, and then a week later not know anything about that topic, and everyone can do that. Like it's possible to cram a bunch of stuff into your sort of, we always say short and long-term memory, but there's like short-term, and then there's the like medium-term memory, the stuff that lasts like a week and then you forget about it. Like no one ever talks about that, but I really believe that there's long-term memory, and then there's actual long-term memory, the kind of stuff that you actually learned. That's different than just like you crammed some facts in your head real quick.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Just it makes me think of IQ tests, and like I saw so much of that in Asia with their education system. Being able to see what their actual curriculum were, and like also it'd be like at those these supplementary schools, like what were they teaching? How did they teach it? And like that whole thing that they say about Asians, where it's okay to do poorly in English class, so to speak, or literature class, but getting bad scores in math, that's just unacceptable because it just shows that you're lazy. And like that was the conception that I heard before I went to Asia. And then I went there and I'm like, yeah, they're totally right. Because what they do is they just do it again and again. It's just drilling. They have other benefits too. Like they can actually count to 10 on one hand. Right. So they do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then they do 6, 7, 8, 9, and then like 10 is like this, but you can do like 10, but that means you can do up to 100 on your hands. So just arithmetically, you can imagine how much of an advantage that would be. So there are multiple factors for that little thing, but you can definitely prep for a test and not understand anything. But that's one thing that I always focused on is that kind of retention where you can spit out the entire thing that happened. But I got a couple. So the other thing that you mentioned when we were talking last time that was a huge benefit for actually going through law school was learning how to research. In other words, that's finding out what the applicable law is. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I mean, finding out what the applicable law is something that you have to learn in law school. Like you don't have a choice, because like you're going to write briefs and whatever, and if you're going to be a lawyer, that's the only option. But the reality is, like, it's really easy if you don't care about convincing a court. Like you just want to know what the law is, like just Google it now. Like there's like legal blogs that explain every single point of every single thing that you could ever want, and you don't need to know it that well. Like I used to think researching was super important, but I believe now that if I never researched anything again, I'd be just fine, because like I can just Google it. And I mean, that's a form of research, but I'm going to get a summary somewhere that's going to be good enough 99% of the time. Obviously, if you get a summary and there's a picture of Care Bears on it or something, it might not be the right website, but you find like, big law firms publish articles on this stuff because they want to increase their prestige. Or you find like a blog that all they do is talk about Supreme Court jurisprudence. Like if you're reading it on a thing like that, probably it's going to be good enough for your purposes. the only time it's going to matter is if you're actually in court trying to prove your case, right? And the goal, I think, for most people, if they're being reasonable, is never to go to court, right? Like, you don't want to ever get to that point. The goal is just to structure stuff in a way that that there's a clear and easy way out, like you said.
Yeah, awesome. I keep on reading ahead to the next question, and I seem dismissive on whatever you just said. It's very strange, but sorry.
It's okay.
Anyway, the next question I have here is we were talking about how lawyers are idiots, and I think what you really meant was that, I mean, you didn't say that. Somebody said it. A little bird flew in the window and said, lawyers are idiots. And it was strange because it was a virtual meeting, but it happened. Yeah, but anyway, I say that they're overcautious. I think that's how I summarize what you said. Basically, they don't have that killer instinct of a business person who knows that, if you want to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. It was something like that.
Yeah. So the thing about law school is, unlike doing the studying that I described, which is just doing the flashcards and stuff, is what they teach you in law school is, here's all the things that can go wrong. This could go wrong. This could go wrong. This could go wrong. This could go wrong. Well, if you listen to that for 3 years of law school, all of the things that could go wrong, and then you spend a bunch of time studying and writing about all of the hard things that you have to do to solve those things, you just become really cautious. And that doesn't make a particularly good business person. Most lawyers I know, and I don't think I said they were idiots. I think I said most lawyers are bad business people. And I really do believe that. I think it's like talking to an insurance agent. Like, if you talk to an insurance, there's a use for this, right? But like, or someone who does like actuary tables to decide how long people are going to live. These people are pessimistic as all get out. Like, I would rather just like assume some stuff's going to go wrong, but I'm going to figure my way through it. And like you say, figure it out, right? Like, that's the deal.
Right. That's so funny. Yeah, it reminds me of the conversation I had with my life insurance guy, and of course I immediately go to how can I put that into a video bit, like I guess the example would be if you see your spouse drowning in the ocean, and saying like, it's okay, she's insured, and then the insurer says, no, she's not. That'd be natural causes if she's having a heart attack. Oh shit, I better get out there.
Yeah. I mean, so what I always found interesting about death insurance, and I say that really clearly, it's death insurance, right? It's not like It's not life insurance. Like, if it was life insurance, I'd buy this stuff. Like, if they could promise me I'd stay alive, that'd be amazing. I would pay whatever I need for that, right? But no. All they're doing is saying, hey, if you die, we'll give you some money. What good is that? I mean, it doesn't do you any good. Like, yes, if
you're gonna chase
family them, and like your family needs to be protected, and it can make you feel like more secure, but it's like so much easier, in my opinion, just to like, as soon as possible, figure out how to have enough assets that you don't need life insurance. Like, I know people use it as an investment tool and stuff, and there are some tax reasons to do that, but like, in general, you'd be better off if you just had enough income coming in that if you didn't work, your bills would still be paid. Because if you get to that point, your kids don't need to worry. Your spouse doesn't need to worry. You might need to set up a trust or something if they're not able to manage the assets because they're kids or whatever. But you really don't have much to worry about because you can't insure your life. You can only get paid if you die, and that seems like a bad trade. I don't want to get paid for dying. I'd rather just not die.
That makes a lot of sense. But the next question I have here for you is, it goes to, I know that you also got your MBA as well, another thing you don't generally tell people. But the question that I'd have to say, and I guess I should say before I even mention the MBA thing, like, I recognize that being a lawyer, it means you're a freelancer. It's a gig economy thing. And that's something that I know a lot about between, being a teacher and then also tech and all that kind of stuff. And I understand that going after customers has to suck as a lawyer. And then the other one that I keep on hearing is that the problem is that when you get a client, they're already so screwed because they didn't have a lawyer or they didn't listen to the lawyer's advice that it's not fun. It's like you feel bad for the person.
That's so when I first started practicing law, I did a little bit of everything. So I did criminal law, divorce law, whatever. And I'll tell you, like, fighting over kids, not fun. Like, not fun at all. Like, I couldn't do it. I had to stop. Dealing with criminals, not fun. Couldn't do it. Had to stop. That's literally the reason I ended up in bankruptcy law. And again, the one thing I liked about bankruptcy law is I felt like I was helping people, because unlike a lot of those other areas, like, people, no one likes their divorce attorney. They always think that the divorce attorney could have done better, or like something was wrong. I've never met anyone who liked their divorce attorney, or if they did, it's like, it could have been worse. So I kind of am okay with my divorce attorney, right? But people like their bankruptcy attorneys because generally they're really screwed up, like you said. And they're told like, hey, you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars, but if you give me $1,500, you won't owe any money anymore. So it's kind of a good deal for them. And when you're like in a really bad spot and people are calling you constantly and harassing you, the magic of bankruptcy in the US is like the creditors stop calling like the next day, because it's literally illegal. Like, if you call someone in bankruptcy and ask for the money, you're in trouble, right? So so they stop calling really fast, because like you get a case number and then if someone calls you, you're like, hey, I just filed bankruptcy, and they hang up on you. That's the end of it, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's like a magic trick for people who are in a really bad spot. And so, yeah, I mean, so it wasn't too bad. But the problem, of course, is it sounds good in principle, but you hit on it exactly. It's very difficult to get people to pay you $1,500 when they're broke and they can't pay their house payment, right? Like if you're losing your house and your car, like, and then they come into the office and you're like, okay, listen, I can fix this for you, but you have to give me $1,500. And it's not like you can extend them credit, because if you say, hey, give me $200 and pay the rest later, then like you're a credit. Now you're one of their creditors and you have to file bankruptcy against yourself. And so you don't collect the money, right? Like you really have to collect it all up front. And it was a challenge, but yeah, and like you said, it's a one-off. It's very transactional, so it's kind of a gig economy kind of thing. And we spent a lot of money on marketing, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, television commercials, phone book ads. I wouldn't do phone book ads anymore. I might not even do television commercials anymore, but back in the 90s, that's how we did it, right?
Right. Yeah, it's funny. You definitely struck a nerve with me in funnel fixing, because like I'll frequently have people. It's like, oh, I paid these guys 30 grand for this, and I paid these guys that. Now I'm out of money. It's just like, why don't you hit me up sooner, you asshole?
Yeah, no, I know, right? like it would have been a lot easier if you called me before you had this problem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But people do what they have to do, and sometimes like your priorities are such that you're trying. I mean, you're trying, and you don't plan it. Like, I'm sure there are examples of people who plan bankruptcies, but for the most part, it's something happened. They lost their job, they got sick, whatever, and it just didn't work out the way they planned. And I'm sympathetic to that. I get it. I mean, I had the same thing happen to me when I got leukemia. I didn't know, and I ended up bankrupt. I mean, I was a bankruptcy attorney who went bankrupt. I didn't like it, but I didn't have a choice. I could have done things differently, in retrospect. I can see that there were strategies that would have avoided it. Like, I could have invested in real estate sooner. And now I wouldn't. I mean, I can't envision something that would cause me to go bankrupt, because if I don't work tomorrow, I still have rent coming in. I still have income, right? And I think that, like, with your business, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but people are making the decisions based on the limited information they have, and sometimes you make the wrong decision. You hire the wrong people. I mean, I'm guilty of this. Like, I've hired marketing people before and thrown a lot of money at things and gotten very bad results. And then other times you like post like a single video on Instagram and it turns into like a home run. It's like, it's really easy to think that throwing money at it's the solution, but really, if you throw money at the wrong strategy, it doesn't do any good. And that's where somebody like you can be really useful.
Well, it's interesting, because that goes back to what you were saying a minute ago about how you could totally do test prep and pass the bar. It's the same thing, where you could have that that opportunity. But like I'm saying, like it's just like when you're trying to judge people's character, judge what they're going to do, like all those kinds of guesses. It's like a bigger price tag doesn't mean that they're necessarily better. A lot of people come to me after they learned about online marketing, and it's like, okay, so you went to the guru who pays somebody like me to do the thing that you actually went through to do. And then the guru tells you to set something up exactly like what you just went through. But that means you need a guy like me anyway. So just come to me first and we'll build your stuff and just quit all the whatever, right? But you were also talking about how now you can Google so much of what's out there. So, like there are more and more developers and tech people who have no paper. And that's what I was bringing up earlier when I was mentioning your MBA. So as a licensed attorney who doesn't practice law, but, and also an MBA where, it's you're doing building. So I'm not sure how much that applies either. But in your opinion, what paper is out there that you think is actually worth it?
So I think that, I mean, I have a lot of college, right? It's not just like more than even you just described. Like, for example, a month ago, I finished a 4-course graduate certificate in real estate investing from Harvard. So I went to Harvard and took classes, even though I work for myself and I'm not getting a promotion for it and nothing is ever coming of it other than I get a little square piece of paper with my name on it and the Harvard logo, right? And it wasn't cheap, right? I mean, it wasn't as expensive as you might think, but it was like $12,000 and a bunch of work. And so but I actually think that was completely worth it because I learned a lot about finance and about real estate that I didn't already know. And some of the shows that I do on my podcast are like essentially swiped from that class. Like I'll pick a topic that I just studied and be like, I'm going to share this knowledge. But that's the thing, right? It was worth it for me because it created structure. But, could you get that knowledge somewhere else? Absolutely. You could just watch my show, right? Like it's free on YouTube. So, but the thing is, so when you talk about whether a piece of paper is worth it or not, it depends on what your goal is. If you want to be a lawyer and practice law, your law degree is definitely worth it because it's the only option, right? If you want to be a doctor, you got to go to med school. It's just the way it is, right? Like you don't have a choice. And that's because there are unions, and that's what those are, like the ABA, the American Bar Association, or the MD, the American Medical Doctor Associations, that force the law to say you have to do this a certain way. And there are advantages to that. Like, I mean, it's a quality control issue. You don't get a bunch of people just like, doing surgery without a license, which is, that's actually also illegal. And it's a good thing, right? That people have this training. But there's no particular reason why you have to go to an accredited med school to learn how to do surgery. Like theoretically, there could be a completely different way to learn that surgery. Like you could watch it on YouTube and practice on small children or something. I don't know, but like
literally in any other country. I've run into this before because I got some friends who are physicians, and for them to switch over, like I can switch continents like it's no problem, right? But they're tied to their license and their degree, and it's kind of lame when they're the most educated people on earth. And they still have no mobility, but
and that's the thing though. So if you have a specific career path, then I think your paper's worth it. Or if you have a specific goal and you look at a program and you say, hey, I really want to learn everything there is to learn about the law. Is it possible to learn, issue spotting like I described? Absolutely, it is. And you probably could learn everything you want about law school by reading books about and looking at course catalogs and seeing what classes law schools are requiring people to take. And you could probably like bumble your way through it. But it probably, to learn that level of knowledge, it would probably take you longer than the 3 years it would take to go to law school. So if it's not a money thing, like say you had a full scholarship like I did to law school, and you had the time, and you really wanted to learn it, it's worth it for you. But it's limited to that specific subset. And I feel that way about, undergrad or really any education beyond, basic high school level education. It's a function of what's your goal for what you're learning. Because, getting a 4-year college degree used to mean that you made a lot more money. And it still does mean you make a little bit more money. But it's less and less relevant all the time. Like in the field of development or coding or cybersecurity, I actually feel like, there are certifications that are way more valuable than a 4-year degree in computer science would be, right? Because a Microsoft certification is like gold compared to like a 4-year degree from a state university somewhere. And maybe you need to do both, depending on the hiring protocols and whatnot. But I think college is actually overrated. And I'm saying that as a person who has a lot of college, like hundreds of credit hours of college, way more than what I need for any of my degrees, because I'm weird and I like going to school. But I do think that it's not for everyone, and it's definitely not something you should do as a career track.
Yeah. So like basically you'd have to have another plan. And of course, I am thinking about the people who have no cash, no friends, no family, or at least, I mean, like, when I say family, like dependents, sure. But I mean, nobody who they could, rely on. There's no safety net or anything like that. Sure. So I'm imagining somebody who, like, if they really wanted to better themselves in their spare time, working 2-3 jobs, something like that. It's like, okay, well, they could give it a try and see if that works out. I guess that would also make them a lot more likely to get the scholarship, which would take the money side out of the equation, right?
Yeah, and I mean, so there's money and time, right? So 4 years of your life that you could be doing something else if you go to a 4-year university degree, and then if you go to law school, it's another 3 years. If you do an MBA, another couple of years. So what you're talking about, like 10 years of my life in college, right? That's a long time. Right. And that's fine. It was good for me. I don't regret it, but not because of the degrees, but because of the quality of people I met in those institutions. Like some of my best friends I met in college. People that I do business with now that I met in college. And there is a little bit of credibility of saying, hey, I'm a lawyer. Like there's value in that, right? Like people have a different way of perceiving you because of your education. So there are good things that come out of that. But if I were starting over, I don't know that I would even do it. Even though I've gotten a lot out of it, I don't know that I would do it. That 10 years, hard to get back.
Yeah. I don't see how you can get away with it unless you're in real estate. Quite frankly, it's you're just not going to get. I think the gatekeepers are the HR managers. And, they're always going to be looking for the Microsoft certification, as you mentioned, or whatever. But one thing I like to do in the directly related to real estate related podcast is I like to ask people to describe the person who professionally you could help the most. And of course, I mean, without breaking any SEC rules. And I also don't really mean giving handies in an alleyway. But I mean, like if like for you, is it someone who is looking to syndicate their deals, or is it apartment complex owners, or who want to expand their portfolio?
Yeah, no, I love that. So, I'm definitely not doing the alleyway thing, but no, who I can help the most is actually someone who has more money than time. I syndicate deals. We put together, real estate investments with solid returns for people. So if someone, maybe they're a doctor or a lawyer and they want to have exposure to real estate investing, and they don't know how to do it, or they don't have time to do it. That's honestly, that's probably where we can help most in the real estate world. But really, what I really want to help people with, even more than that, is like, I don't want them to give me money and invest in my deals. I mean, that's cool if you want to. I'm cool. We can build a relationship and we can talk about that. But I really just want people to figure out what their goals are, and I want to help them find those goals. So like, that's not a real estate thing. It used to be for me when I first started syndicating deals. It was like, man, real estate's great. It's changed my life. I want to help everyone invest in real estate. And then I would talk to someone. I'd be like, hey, Dan, you should invest in real estate. And you'd be like, I don't know. I'm a cybersecurity guy and a marketer. I don't really care about real estate. Real estate's boring. I don't want to invest in real estate, whatever. Right. And I went, what a dumbass. Like, why is he doing that? Like, everyone should invest in real estate. And that was my perspective. But after a few years of getting that same objection, I realized some of the people were just scared and didn't want to do it. But I also realized there actually are people that have no interest in real estate. They don't care. They don't want to live. They want to live in their house. They don't want to own anything. Right.
Right.
And that's actually okay. And once I accepted that, I realized, the world is so much broader than real estate. Like, you can create passive income, and that's awesome. You can do that in real estate, but you can also do that by writing a book or, directing a movie or something and, get royalties forever. There are lots of businesses you can build that will support your lifestyle forever that don't have anything to do with owning real estate. Right. And when I recognized that, I went, you know what? Like, my best version of my life. And I always say, I have this podcast called Last Life Ever, right? So I say the best version of my last life ever is being a real estate investor that has this income coming in that gives me the freedom to do things like climb Mount Kilimanjaro, which was awesome. And take a month off and go to Puerto Rico this year, stuff like that. But Dan's best version of his last life ever might have nothing to do with real estate. You might just build a marketing company online that supports that lifestyle. Or for that matter, you might not give a crap about going to Puerto Rico. You might just want to make sure your bills are paid and you get to go I don't know, like dog sledding or whatever Canadians do on the weekends, because that's what you guys do up there, right? It's like snow in the middle of the summer kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, or road hockey.
Yeah, right. I'm being a little facetious, but the point is, I really do, if I could help someone, it would be recognize that, we get this one shot and, we owe it to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, to our countries, to our world, to, live the best possible version of our life. And it sounds selfish a little bit, but it's really not, because the better you live, the more value you provide, the better the world becomes, the better everyone else becomes. And you can be an example for people, but you can also help people. Living the best version of your life isn't going out and giving handies, right? It might be, I suppose, but probably the best version of your life is doing some charitable work. And maybe that's the same thing. I don't know. But for me, it's feeding the hungry is probably, one step above the back alley handy.
Right, exactly. Jeff, thank you so much for coming today. And then that way I can edit them all together. But it's really been awesome talking to you about all this kind of stuff. What's the best way to get a hold of you? Is it through LinkedIn or?
Yeah, so if people want to find me, probably Instagram actually is the easiest. It's just at Jeffrey Holst. Yeah.
All right.
I'm everywhere though as Jeffrey Holst. I'm easy to find.